everyone. I'm James Christian. I'm based in Cardiff. It's my 5th year at this company called Backbase, as you see on the slide. I have to have slides, otherwise my thoughts go all over the place. I've put myself down as an individual contributor because I'm hacking code again, which is great. From a long time out in management, I was previously the development director. I thought I'd mention that here just in case we come to questions. I've been on the other side of the fence when Trey's sending people in my direction. I've been a hiring manager on the other side of the fence as well. But I guess, yeah, so what am I going to cover today? Really my path to FinTech, a bit of a recent insider's view from the industry, hopefully with a little bit of a engineering perspective on it and why it was kind of interesting, my perceptions of the industry, the opportunities, the challenges, and a little tiny bit about the tech stacks at the end. So quick thing about Backbase, we've founded in 2003, a Dutch company, privately owned, thousands of employees now globally. Essentially what we try to do, we promise that we help banks become loved by their customers, and we do that by looking to design all of the digital touch points that people have with their bank, their websites, their apps, for their end customers, but also their employees. So we're at over 100 banks and financial institutions around the globe, and we're pretty good at it. It's a bit of an old slide, but these analysts come in and they check to make sure you're doing a good job, and we're doing a good job. We're typically market leader in that quadrant. So Backbase Cardiff started off in the back of the Toby Carvery back in 2016. We've now developed to be one of the largest Backbase product development hubs on the globe. We're nearing about 100 software engineers, product owners, scrum masters, QAs, UX specialists, and we're still growing. I was lucky to help be part early doors in that and help grow that office. And a bit of a path through my career. I won't walk through every step of my career, but within here, you see from the start, I graduated computer science at Cardiff University. In here is a range of industries: digital TV, education technology, fashion, e-commerce, and now most recently, FinTech. These are startups, scale-ups, big enterprises. So I've worked across a whole range of different kind of size organizations. And that's a great thing, right? Computer science or computing or software engineering as a degree, we're blessed to be able to explore these domains and verticals. I generally believe I have taken things from these other industries into each subsequent hop through my career as well. So it's been really interesting. So this has been across Wales and worked in London and in Hampshire as well for some of these roles. It's fair to say I have no particular affinity with FinTech or financial services, as you can see from my history, and indeed I resisted it really for years. I think each one of those transitions, I inevitably looked at banking, especially when I was working in London, because you can't avoid it really. But I was really put off by the horror stories from my friends in the city at the time. You know, this super macho culture, maybe not the friendliest or most open compared to the startups and scale-ups that I've been working in. Some of the best engineers I know ended up working for banks, but they're really underutilizing their skills, really just keeping legacy systems on their feet. Culturally, really old school command and control in a lot of these companies. A big project management lead on it, huge multi-year release cycles, people's working weekends, really burning out. And also risk averse, quite compliancy heavy. You know, as in other roles, I had quite a free reign, but of course, compliancy and the FCA, for example, in the UK, not a bad thing when dealing with money, but you know, these banks were still having massive outages for multiple weeks. What was going on there in the engineering culture, you know? So for me, is how quickly can I get a change into production and into the hands of real users? I was a little put off by it by an industry, but actually, when you look at the wider FinTech landscape, it is a lot more diverse than I originally considered. And for a start, it's not just banking. On the left, you see the first page of the membership of FinTech Wales, and ourselves and creators on there. And you'll see it's actually a mixture of pure software or SaaS providers, you know, software technology providers, but also financial service providers, you know, the classics, the Admirals and so on, that have a tech hub in-house. And on the right-hand side is a quote out of the semi-recent Khalifa review where they sort of define it, and it was almost like, well, actually, what is FinTech? And it really, it's the adoption of technology, but it's not just by technology companies, but also the incumbent financial institutions. And it's all about delivering better financial outcomes for customers, better financial health for people, right? So within all of these mix of companies, there's probably a good fit for everyone in there, right? Each have their pros and cons. There's definitely the fast-paced, all-in, high-risk, high-reward startups in there. versus more stable financial institutions, that have been running for a while, financially very, stable, that house an in-tech team. You've got the opportunity to work client side, so actually working within a financial services company in their tech team. So you're really close to the business requirements, but perhaps a much more narrow focus in terms of what you're delivering versus a global vendor who may have a broader suite of products, a broader suite of technology, and international opportunities which come off the back of that as well. So I think there's a real, if you can't find a role in fintech that suits you, I'd be very surprised. So what triggered that explosion of all those companies, that kind of revolution? And from my perspective, that's relatively recent, I guess, there was two main things. There was around customers' expectations and expectations back on the customers, and legislation and competition working together, which sort of provide opportunity. So this is a snapshot out of a 44-page guide you can download today, of a system that was live in about 2017, up until about 2017. This is a customer-facing site, so you would be given a 44-page PDF to learn how to make a payment and to search for payments. And why did this happen? There was a lot of renewal and upgrade cycles for this software. It tended to be really slow, multi-year, as I said before, a lot of risk averse, a lot of legacy code. Don't touch that code, it's going to break. So often their software was lagging behind in sort of those UX principles that we expect today. Often these UIs weren't designed with end customers in mind. Frankly, a lot of customers, and I'm not saying this is true for this particular customer, but when internet banking came on the scene, a lot of banks already had software running on site for in-branch or a call center, and they would upsell a module to say now you can make it available on the web. So you get the same kind of user experience as was for the internal employees. So it's not particularly designed around how you wanted to use the software. And conversely, us, the general public, we wanted to do more online. We've become a lot more tech savvy, and banks are often miles ahead in terms of UX, UI paradigms that we've become accustomed to in things like transactional e-commerce sites and apps, the kind of stuff I've been building in previous companies. So there's big opportunity there, I thought. So we wanted better. And you can say, well, how did they get away with it for so long? Arguably, if there were better options that were easier to switch to different banks as well, we probably would have. I think this is where this comes in. Legislation. The government around the world have been shaking up the incumbents. They've been lowering the entry to market. You have to hold less assets now and not been running for so long as a going concern to gain your banking license these days. They've demanded it's easier to switch banks. And they've demanded financial institutions make their data more accessible. So things like open banking, PSD2, this has allowed other businesses to be built around this data, being able to access your account information, make payments on your behalf. So really opening up that market. And there's some fintechs have been drawn to that. So now we have this, more competition. What does this mean for the incumbent? The battle is now on the customer experience. Really, loans are loans, mortgages are mortgages. But why do I keep going back to Netflix or Deliveroo or Uber? And it's generally around customer experience. So the neobanks, the Monzos, the N26, the Starlings, as I mentioned, they weren't shackled so much by legacy. They moved fast and they built a modern approach to their user experience, right? But the incumbents are catching up now, and that's literally what my company do. They help banks and new banks and incumbent banks deliver the same kind of experience. Cost savings are also massive on this. So obviously digitalization, we all know trying to remove paper from the industry was a big deal. But even when you ring up call centers, we would have customer support representatives at some of the banks we go into could have 10 systems open and they were jumping around different screens, writing things on note paper, copy and pasting. So how do you make their life better so they can deliver a better customer experience? So yeah, even the incumbents needed help to comply and to compete, and that's kind of where fintechs came in. So I'm using a very lazy Lego analogy. Financial institutions were looking for innovative, best-in-class, specialized and localized products where customer experience and security are the key differentiators, right? They don't want to build everything themselves anymore. They want to avoid that mistake of building that closed box solution that's difficult to evolve and stop them being competitive. So let's open up the marketplace for loads of multiple fintech vendors to come in and help with any kind of financial institution. So for example, let's say you had a startup that was really good at categorizing transactions in Venezuela, like that's a payment for food, that's a payment for, there's probably a bank interested in that. And even in my relatively short fintech career, I've put a cloud in the middle of this, because you've got to mention cloud. even in the 5 years I've been here, when I started at Backbase, it was like, can't imagine many of our banks going to the cloud. The appetite is huge. We are now offering banking as a service, a SaaS solution, a PaaS solution for our banks. So it's not just about banks buying software, they're allowing other companies to run parts of their business for them. So that's moved on a lot. Also, FinTech for good, I think it's going to be touched on in the next talk a bit more, but also the ethical grounding of a company is increasingly important. We know that. And this open data and open APIs, for example, has allowed people to pull together solutions. You could pull together the technology now to form a credit union to help the unbanked. Or this company Evershare, I think they're based on in Bristol, they use an open banking. I've circled a particular bit. They use an open banking payments APIs to drive down the cost of taking payments for charities. So final slide, just talking about stacks. So kind of alluded to it in an earlier slide. It really comes down to appetite for risk, really. I certainly from my bit of experience so far. In the middle is the stack we typically use in Backbase. Maybe if you're a bit of a programming historian or keen to work in a niche language and make that niche language money, Fortran and COBOL could be quite interesting. In the middle, we've kind of got a mixture of modern but well-supported software, typical stack there. And the reason that kind of works well for our customers is they're confident they can find the talent in the market. They're confident that technology's got backing by big, the Googles and the Amazons and so on. So they have a level of confidence with that. But they certainly are, if you think that's too orthodox, and you want to have a hack around with Rust and Flutter and so on, maybe a startup, they may be more open to these kind of technologies. The kind of obvious technologies which aren't on here, which are increasingly playing a role in our industry to support around things like data science, AI, machine learning, these are increasingly playing a role, and there's some very good PaaS solutions being built around that technology as well. And I'm going to say the word crypto and blockchain because I have to. It's not something we've done a lot in our company, but there are certainly companies in South Wales who are helping people with their wallets and so on. So yeah, it's not a huge demand in my particular industry, but in my particular small part of the industry, but you do see roles growing for that. So that's it. That's me.
Thank you very much, James. Yeah, that was brilliant. Just to remind people before we move on to our last speaker, if you if you do have any questions as they're speaking, you don't have to wait until the Q&A portion of the evening to pop them in the little questions box that should be in your menu. So yeah, now we've got Tim, who's the CEO at Credas, to speak last. So I will make him the presenter and hand it over to him. Here you go, you should have it now.
Thank you, Lauren.
No worries.
So yeah, my name's Tim Bonner. I'm the CEO here at Credas. We're based in Cardiff on the Welsh Riviera, as nobody's calling it. And what we do really is we allow our customers to meet their compliance obligations. So what that actually means in real language is that if in life you've ever been asked to take your passport or your driver's license in somewhere so they can confirm your ID, or you've been asked to give your 3 months bank statement or utility bills to confirm your address, what we do is we have an app and a solution which basically means you don't have to do that anymore. It can be replaced with a process that takes about 20 seconds. It's more robust, it's quicker, and clearly it's greener because you don't have to be driving around, going into an office somewhere where they photocopy all your personal details. It'll kick around in the office in an in tray for a few weeks and then get shoved out the back in a filing cabinet for years. I remove all of that with our app. Our app, it's very good. Quite proud of it actually. It's number 14 in the iOS charts at the minute for business apps. Out there alongside Facebook and Zoom and LinkedIn and stuff, which for a smallish business of about 50 people based in Cardiff is an achievement that we're very proud of. So that's about us. There's a couple of things really that I'll talk about over the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. Probably the first one is that when people talk about jobs in FinTech, there's always a danger really that the assumption is that they're talking about just developers or coding or highly technical roles. And the reality is that FinTech businesses have a myriad of different jobs and roles that need filling. These can include testing, R&D, the function of a company's product team is absolutely critical. technical support, onboarding, config, technical customer service, project management. James touched on UI, UX, absolutely critical. Even sales, if you think about it, if you have individuals with a combination of technical skills and sales skills, then all in the same person, that's a really highly sought after skills mix, which is actually very well paid. Even things like legal, the sector requires real skills and understanding the sort of legal complexities that we all face, especially particularly around the movement of data. So whilst I appreciate much of the audience tonight, we'll be looking at technically focused roles. It is really important to understand that not all the jobs in FinTech revolve around developers and coding. I founded my first technology business when I was in my 20s, exited to a Taiwanese multinational. And whilst I personally have got a good technical sort of basis for my knowledge, my roles within technology have nearly always been commercially focused. My role here at Credus as a CEO requires clearly a fundamental understanding of the technology solutions that we create, but most of my work time is actually spent on commercial functions such as funding, revenue growth, forecasting, assessing opportunities and analysing market trends. So I don't have much to do really with the technical day-to-day elements of the business. One of my big areas of focus actually is ensuring that our business, Credus, reflects the communities in which we operate, that we reflect the communities from which we recruit from the society in which we sell our solutions into. And it's very, very important. For us, millions of people a year will use our solution, and those people could be young, could be old, or are young, are old, educated, non-educated, able-bodied, disabled, and come from all types of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. And I think it's very important really that the products and services that we offer don't exclude sections of our society. If all we do really is reflect people, or if all we do is recruit people from the same age bracket, who look the same, come from the same place, we'll end up developing solutions for those type of people and excluding groups within our society that we shouldn't do. It wouldn't be cool. The FinTech sector and technology in general really perhaps isn't as good as we could be in reflecting what our country looks like. I'll give you a personal example. My son's about to graduate this year from his computer science degree, and only 8% of his course are female, which is extraordinary if you think about it. 92% of the people on that course are guys. So we need to do more, as a whole sector really, to make sure that we're inclusive and welcoming of diversity. And I spend a lot of my time talking about this. We do a lot of work within the business to ensure that we are inclusive. Give you an example, we employ double the number of women now that we did 9 months ago after a lot of effort we've made in this area. And our BAME representation for Black and Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds is triple the national average. And a lot about that is creating the optics to ensure that everyone feels comfortable to apply for roles in the first place. I've been asked really to maybe spend a minute or two with some advice for people entering into the industry. And I think some really interesting things happened recently. COVID and the move to work from home has really in effect democratized the jobs market. 2 years ago, we as a business really used to recruit almost exclusively locally in South Wales for technical roles. And now we're competing not only against firms in London, I'm sure James gets the same in his business, and Shay sees it a lot as well, but we're now competing against firms in New York and California. There are developers sitting in Merthyr Tydfil working for American law firms on really big money. So this is really, really good and exciting actually for people starting their careers in technology and specifically in FinTech. You don't really need to just look at what's on your doorstep or even what's in your region. There's now opportunities open to you from all over the UK and indeed actually all over the world, which is very, very exciting. So the first piece of my advice would be to cast your net wide when looking at opportunities and don't feel the need to be constrained by geography when you're looking for jobs. Another point that's worth making is to really research a prospective employer. It's a candidates market. Companies like Backbase, companies like Credus are looking for people like yourselves. We're looking for people to enter into the sector. There's a real skills shortage in some technical roles. And there are things that are more important to some candidates than there are to others. It's seldom all about salary. Some of those considerations could be, what the working hours and the work-life balance might look like. and what that prospective employer can do to help you in that area. If the role is office-based, the quality of your working environment, if you're stuffed in a poky little office somewhere that's horrible, it really has a massive effect not only on your working life, but on your private life outside afterwards as well. The ethical stance of the business and the sector that they work in, we should all really be proud of where we work, not embarrassed, and whether the product itself actually is interesting. If you're working on a solution that really interests you, that you find really, really cool, it makes it so much easier to be engaged. It makes your entire working life so much more pleasant. Increasingly important, is the ability to upskill and what a new employer might offer you in terms of access to training and your ability to improve your skills. Very, very important to take that into consideration. Some employers are absolutely excellent in this regard, and others maybe less so. And obviously the future career prospects and opportunities for advancement with a new employer, if that's what's important to you. The last point in this section I'd like to make actually is about ensuring that people understand that there's more than one route into FinTech and into technology in its wider sense, even for technical roles. Some people just simply aren't able to attend university and access the university system, and quite often that's for financial reasons. So there are alternative routes that you can consider. One of which is there's a number of excellent apprenticeship schemes that exist, particularly in South Wales, some really good stuff around cybersecurity. Some of these courses are government funded in part or wholly, and run in collaboration between the universities and local technology business, and they provide a really, really good alternative route for those who can't access the university system. And then lastly, I've been asked to maybe spend a moment just talking about FinTech and the FinTech sector in South Wales. We're very, very fortunate, and Shay touched on this in the opening address, that if it's not the biggest, it's certainly right up there as a FinTech hub in the UK. And there really is an awful lot of good stuff driving out of South Wales in particular. There are also other areas, a region in Wales where there's some really important FinTech businesses. There's a lot of good stuff to shout about regarding FinTech in Wales. There's some real successes. As a hub, there's a lot of collaborations taking place between companies that are located here in Wales as a result of bumping into each other. And I can speak from personal experience. Actually, Credus has a number of collaborations with firms based in Cardiff and in Swansea, purely because we bump into each other at events, have a chat, talk to each other. We've been introduced by firms like FinTech Wales, operations like FinTech Wales. We're doing a really, really good job of promoting the Welsh FinTech sector. And this really becomes a virtuous circle. The more successful FinTech businesses there are, the more they get attracted to the region, and the more that are founded here in the first place. There's really good cooperation between government, particularly Welsh Government, and the FinTech sector and educational establishments in Wales, with the universities and FE colleges often working in partnership with local businesses to access government funding to help plug skills gaps in the labour force. Personally, and this is only a personal view, I do sometimes wonder whether we're better off looking at the FinTech sector on a more regional basis. I think it's probably fair to say that FinTech businesses in South Wales probably have more in common with our counterparts across the border in places like Bristol, and FinTech businesses in North Wales will probably gravitate more towards Liverpool than they would each other. So I think there's probably a conversation that's worth having at some point as to whether we need to be more regional in our approach. But if I'm honest, that's for people well above my pay grade. So hopefully that's useful. It tells you a little bit about us as an example of a FinTech business in Wales. Look, we were founded 4 years ago. We've been trading for 3 years. The definition of exponential growth is when you more than double in size, and look, we're growing up to 50 staff now, and we'll continue to carry on growing, I hope, if I want to keep my job. Really interesting to hear about James's individual journey, and of course Shay will represent lots of companies like ours and will understand what's happening with the jobs market, some of the challenges and opportunities that exist. That's it, Lauren. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you ever so much, Tim. Can I ask all the speakers to return? Thank you very much, as if by magic. So we've got a couple of questions in the questions bar, and again, as we're talking, feel free to keep adding them in. I've got a couple pre-prepared as well. So we'll start off with the first question that was submitted. Which skills or qualifications are most in demand in FinTech in Wales? Any of you feel free to take. One of you, yeah, it's a broad question.
I can dive in. I did a bit of research. As Tim mentioned, I'm not sort of so close to the actual technology on the front line, but across the developers, for the experience sort of hires, it's anything across the developers, UX, Scrum Master, some of the project managers, product design. In terms of the qualifications, I think it's interesting because you'd easily lean on computer sciences or mathematics or some of the analytical side, but I think a lot of the you get as much strength often from the fact that outside of the developer specific roles, from the credibility from going through a degree path. So as Tim mentioned, the variety of people that it takes to enter within a business at the moment and grow a business is huge. But the more specific ones, like the developer roles, you need that experience and that hands-on.
We're both happy with that. James, do you have anything to add? Or?
Particularly, well, I can say from first hand trying to hire them that security. So especially people with application security expertise. So generally, the whole security market is quite hot, but application security, and I think we're quite lucky in South Wales. We've got the cyber academy, right? Still, I'm assuming that's still going. So that's a big one. In fact, we found it so hard to hire, we ended up training people internally on that one. It was quite a tricky one to find. The other one, it's quite hard, is system engineering. So people who can take the software that's been built by, I say this as one, who take the software that's built by the teams and can make it operate in production, and it's self-healing and it's observable and all this kind of stuff. And actually finding people with that experience is quite challenging. But yeah, definitely those two are ones I'd point out.
Not to blow your own trumpet.
Well, I moved back into this particular role. I enjoy it. It's really interesting.
I'd probably echo what James and Shay said, really, particularly around technical roles and developers. It's interesting, actually, that it wasn't so long ago where offshoring would take place and be done for commercial reasons in order to cut costs, whereas now I'm aware of lots of people who, in South Wales were offshoring lots of technical work, not to save money, but purely because it's difficult to find people with those skills due to a skill shortage in that area. And that's not uncommon at all now. If I'm sat in a room with 10 other technology companies, normally 5, 6 or 7 of them will be doing some degree of offshoring. But yeah, very different driver. It used to be done as a cost saving exercise, and now it's done literally to plug skills, plug labour shortages, which I think is quite interesting. Also exciting if you're looking to come into this sector, isn't it? Because you'll have an awful lot of choices, some really, really interesting roles.
Yeah.
Flipping the question ever so slightly, if I had a young person coming into industry, I'd push them harder now than ever towards front-end application development, because where that's come on with some of the more modern frameworks, it's really, really interesting space. They used to think that all the big heavy lifting engineering all happened in the back end with the Javas and the COBOLs, but actually the architecture and the sophistication now in the front end is, especially web front end, is fabulous. So I would push people towards that more than I would have in the past as a back end entrenched guy, I guess.
I think as well, right? Some amazing things can be achieved, right? Even by people just entering in, and these things sort of sound highfalutin. But I'll give you a really practical example, and I hope if she watches it, she doesn't mind me using her name. But our mobile app developer Phoebe is a good example. She joined us directly out of university, and yeah, as I touched on earlier, our mobile app will be in the top 20 of business apps on the iOS store. And so even people entering into the sector can achieve some pretty extraordinary things, and it's really, really exciting because there's such a great wealth of opportunity in front of people. And if you join a company that's really supportive and will go on the journey to increase your skill set, you can do some really, really cool things. And I know Phoebe's very, very proud of what she's achieved with the mobile app, and she absolutely should be, and we're very proud of what she's done as well. But that wasn't achieved by a massive team of 20 people who have been kicking around our sector for a combined 100 years. That was largely achieved by Phoebe, who joined us straight out of university. So that gives you a practical demonstration of what can be achieved.
Yeah. Speaking of, we actually had a question around the app, so I'll go on to that one next. So yeah, my question is for Tim. I have a project manager background and business change, predominantly now within the public sector NHS. How do you engage users to your app? We have to find funding to enable our development. How does your app make profit / create funding? Thank you.
Okay, so users are driven to our app by our customers. So if I give you an example, a customer of ours like Purple Bricks is a good example. So our customer will be Purple Bricks, and then Purple Bricks would engage us to use the solution, and then they will push their customers through this. So instead of you going into an estate agency branch, as an example, giving your passport or driving license and trying to print out copies of your bank statements and all that stuff is a nightmare for all of us because none of us have anymore. Purple Bricks will simply send a link to our app to their customer, and then their customer would use our app to complete the process within 15-20 seconds. So we don't have a B2C play really. It's our customers will drive the traffic to our app.
Brilliant. So just plugging that gap.
Which is good because it'd be really expensive for us to do it.
Yeah. Of course.
From previous organisations where we built apps, and all I can say is we heavily invested in marketing and PR. So just getting that. It wasn't so much grassroots. There was a lot of cross promotion because we had a very popular website. So you can obviously, if you notice people are on the phone when browsing your web, there's always that opportunity to push the app, so you've got your natural kind of install base. But actually working within the NHS itself or public service and trying to get people onto the app, that's I guess you've got the opportunity of the website, right? But I don't know what the Gov UK constraints are about cross-platform promotion.
I think there's some general rules as well. So we have a new service launching later this year. James, you touched on it earlier about wallets. So we have a wallet that we're launching later this year. We'll give that away for free. We'll create millions every year. We'll hit the market with millions. But the reason why we know that will work is because it fulfills a specific role. So if you buy a house at the minute, I'll go back to the property sector because it's a good example. You'll have to do these checks I just told you about, taking in your utility bills and your bank statements on average 5.4 times. You have to do it with the estate agent you buy a house with, and the one you sell a house with, and your conveyancer, and your mortgage provider, and your solicitor, and your IFA, and anyone involved. They all have to do these checks. So our wallet we'll give away for free to consumers, and we'll put those checks already in there, so that then if they want to share them with a solicitor or an estate agent, they can share them instantly, and we'll then bill that solicitor or estate agent. So commercially works for us. But to bring that back relevant to the question that was asked, what that app will be doing or that wallet will be doing is performing a real function that adds value for the end user. Right? It makes their life easier. They don't have to keep on going in 5.4 times with bank statements or utility bills. So as long as the app performs a real function that can add value to the user, the rest, as James says, is largely a marketing operation. But it's clear if it's not providing value, not providing a role, and not helping people's life, then you're probably always going to be pushing uphill.
Yeah.
It's also how often are people going to use it, right? Because we Backbase used to be in a much broader market. It used to be a lot of financial services, and actually we worked out. Do you know what? How many times have people come and view their insurance certificate online? And it's just like not that often. So people aren't really. There isn't really that drive to have an all singing and dancing app, or to spend a lot of money on an all singing or dancing app either. Whereas banking apps and so on, you're more frequently using it. So that's why we focus more on that market. So again, it's do people want to use your app as well? Is the other.
Yeah, it's a starting question, really, isn't it? Yeah, that's good advice. So yeah, Tim's been plunged into darkness. Oh, you're back.
My legs are on a timer, so every 20 minutes I get plunged.
Or you have to sort of, yeah.
I'm still here.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so our next question. So this one's sort of been answered. The one, is there much demand for IT security roles? Yes. Do you have any advice for more experienced hires who want to transfer from other industries into FinTech? So I think probably, obviously, James has touched on this a little bit. Shay, obviously as a recruiter, I imagine both of you have quite interesting thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things for more experience. I mean, the sort of off payroll rules with IR35 changes has sort of impacted the ability to contract quite a lot. So that's changed. It's got to be a permanent move. In terms of the route in, I think you're posed with a little bit of a dilemma. I think either you take one of the options of going into someone with a program, an organization with a program, or you take the options to retrain, or I think the third option would then possibly be looking at a function possibly within a smaller organization where you could add value in the area, your sort of area that your experience is in, but maybe the opportunity to work in a growing business, so gain seniority as that business grows. I think in terms of going from a non-technical function to within a technical function, I think it would have to be via a training or a self-learning route. You know?
Yeah, I'm not clear if the meaning of the word experienced in the question means somebody who's later on in their career or somebody who is experienced technically but not in fintech.
Assuming they're talking about maybe they're an experienced developer, if you take that as a good example, but one of the options is to move into a more of a management role. And so I'll give you an example. We've got a head of development role available at the moment, and with that, you know, anyone coming from outside of fintech wouldn't be precluded from that. And quite often it can be an established career path that an experienced developer might be looking for new challenges, and that might be running a team which requires very different skills. Or if you've run a team elsewhere, you know, many of those skills will be transferable into, you know, into fintech as well. So you can become less technical as you go up the ladder, if that makes sense, and fall back on your experience and your man management skills. And that is a route to move into management out of an overtly technical role.
I think it really depends on sort of, when you say get into fintech, what is it that you're looking to do within that? Is it a change of your sort of personal direction, or is it to gain a different career within a maybe, you know, a sort of more dynamic or a younger organization, or somewhere where you could go somewhere? But the sort of network is interesting with the people I've met through the various awards. Their backgrounds are often diverse, you know, and so it's really interesting. If you're sort of in that circle and in that network, then it's interesting to see what could come from it. That would be a first step.
Yeah.
It's interesting, James, you didn't come from a fintech background, and nor did I. It's quite a new area in a way. You know, it's not an old established 40-year-old sector or anything like that. So generally speaking, I think talent will rise.
Well, I think that's it, right? Like, I definitely wouldn't be intimidated by the domain. You know, my maths got me through uni just about, but it wasn't the kind of maths you need when you're trying to do financial planning, right? But you know, you'll have good support around you. You know, people who've been brought in for that particular expertise, right? In terms of if there is any financial modelling to do or anything like that, there'll be people, like analysts and with math background who will support on that. You know, really, the industry is the industry, and it's very varied, as I tried to allude to in my talk. Some things you wouldn't even really think are necessary, particularly financial. It just so happens a financial services company needs that kind of functionality. Like you know, it's like the work Radis do, and isn't it's very cross industry. I imagine. I'm sure I used your stuff when I was signing up to the NHS website. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I wouldn't be intimidated by the domain, or at least establish if they really want somebody who's got, you know, a real deep understanding of financial modeling. But there's so much variety now, I doubt it. Technology wise, my thing, when we say experience, I've always said I'd like to hire some more experienced people, and actually finding genuinely good senior people is quite difficult because they tend to either stay where they are or jump off to contracting or move into management, sadly. And I would like more people to stay technical, because we miss it. Because when we're bringing in the juniors, and this is my big bugbear at the moment with this whole, as much as you're saying throw the net out wider, I would like South Wales to carry on growing. And I could do with some experienced people to come and help mentor the juniors and mentor those people straight out of uni and give them that rounded support just to accelerate them. They'll get there, but it'll accelerate them. It'll build some confidence into it. So what I look for people who've maybe stayed in the same company for a very long time, or you know, essentially more experience. I'm not allowed to mention age on this, am I right? But it's that eagerness to learn. and the fact that I've gone up and signed up to the Plural site or any of these various websites, and I've built some projects, I've done some stuff because I know that technology I've been stuck using isn't particularly relevant, but here's what I've been doing to cross train and show it, demonstrate it on the CV. Sometimes people come in and they've been out of a job for a while, and they go, look, I've just spent the last 3 months doing this course, this accreditation. I've built this app, I've built something for the society I'm a member of. Just any excuse to build something and show willingness to learn it is key, and that they're open-minded to working in a very agile organization, because I've certainly been jaded by certain techniques and management techniques over the years, but sometimes it's adaptability is really key. So I'd be very surprised if so not being intimidated. The technology, I think, again, show that you're learning. And like I said, I especially if you've got operations experience, that's one thing I've really struggled to find. Engineers who have run stuff in production at scale, they're the kind of skills. If you've got that, they're really, really valuable skills.
Brilliant. I think actually we have a question here that I'm not sure there'll be too much more to say, because I think you put it very, very nicely that just then, James. But I'm in my 50s with many years business architecture in public sector, and now studying for my MSc in computing and IT management at Cardiff Uni because I want to get closer to this exciting stuff. Any advice on a career change? So I don't know if there'll be any more to say on that, just because you even said yourself, people who are maybe a little older, maybe a bit more experience, but I thought I'd say
get amongst it. There are a lot of forums, there are a lot of things going on. It's surprising what may come from the people you will meet. Various different business sizes, various opportunities, technical, not just get amongst it. And I think already the fact that you're doing that, the chap you mentioned is already doing that, they're trying to develop themselves in that area. That's a very, very positive sign. They've probably got far more to offer than they may realize by just them showing the willingness to self-develop, not at that age, but the willingness to change their career and invest in that. So
yeah, I touched on diversity earlier, and it's not only about gender or ethnic background, right? Age is very important as well. I'm sick of being the oldest person in a meeting. It's damaging for my self-esteem. But the thing is that if we're all creating solutions that get used by people in their 80s as well as when they're 18 or even older, we need that richness within our businesses. Does that make sense? If everyone I employ is 25 years old and white and arrives to work on a skateboard wearing Converse, we'll create solutions for that demographic. But the problem is there's millions of people outside of that demographic that use our solutions as well. So yeah, hearing things where people are reskilling themselves later in life makes my heart sing a little bit. So yeah, more of that, please.
Brilliant. Are you spying on me arriving at work, or this sounds a very apt description of myself? No, okay. Right, okay, so we've got another question here. I'm an AAT student as well as an OU student studying IT. When it comes to programming skills required in FinTech, what's the most popular programming language that I should focus on?
Java. Unfortunately, it is the most popular programming language.
Yeah.
It's particularly, as I said, it's very orthodox, it's very safe, it's well established. Yeah, what can I say? It is just the most popular language in the industry, but it's not the only language. So I would say, and as I pushed before with the modern front end work, I would say Java was my base, and that's how long that language has been around. When I came out of uni, that's what I was programming in straight away. And but actually going and working in some other languages, especially JavaScript, TypeScript, you come with a whole different view of development that informs the way you build your software as well. So I would never go deep. I wouldn't back one horse. I would really go for like an empirical and a functional language, just to make sure you've got that. You picking the best of both worlds. And only recently, this embarrasses me, and this is only shifting back recently into the individual contributor role. I picked up Python. Geez, that was a tool that could have saved me so much effort in the last 20 years. So I think having, I think Google, they generally have this thing right where they want you to have one kind of classic like compiled language like Go, and then a Python as a scripting kind of language as well. I think it's useful to have those two in your pocket. Again, this is my bias again, working very back end focus. The front end, there's probably 3 or 4 leading front end frameworks for web. Probably you've pretty much limited on the Android side of things, right? Flutter, we're hearing increasingly being interesting about that to build cross-platform mobile apps as well. Again, my bias of back end there was evident.
Yeah, I would say as someone who works as a data engineer, if you're thinking about getting into the informatics or data space, then obviously Python is super useful there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, good in terms of cross department language. Right. Okay. So I had a couple of other questions lined up already. So what do you think the biggest change to the fintech industry has been since the pandemic?
We've done very well off it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Tim here. Tim looks very happy.
Yeah, I guess if I pick that one up first, then yeah, it's accelerated the adoption of technologies, which would have happened otherwise, but concertinaed it into 18 months. The adoption of, the sort of services that we offer was always going to happen, but it probably, turned that adoption cycle from 5 or 6 years into 18 months. So yeah, very, very good. I'm always squeamish about saying it's been good for business because that seems to ignore the human impact that nearly all of our families have suffered. So I don't in any way deride that. So it always makes me feel slightly uncomfortable. But I think probably the adoption of technology is a big one. The work from home and the democratizing of the jobs market. And to be really clear, as much as I said for the audience, cast your net wide. As an employer, it's nothing I'd like to do more than only recruit from South Wales again, people from our local communities. It's just not possible to do that now. We have to cast our net wider, but it does give candidates, a large number of opportunities. The third big one, which is probably beneath the radar a little bit in terms of access to funding. Now that we're coming out of COVID, there's an awful lot of capital that's backed up that hasn't been invested for the last couple of years. And so there's an awful lot of really good sources of funding for new startups and for growth capital. It's much sort of more readily accessible now than perhaps it was a couple of years ago. So those are probably the 3 biggest ones for me.
Nice one.
We can definitely echo Go on, Jay. Go on.
Well, working practices, absolutely one. Yeah, it's low interest rates, encouraging growth, absolutely another one. And I mean, a big part of the sort of our group's businesses on the SAP side of German technology, the drive to digital transformation. So the confidence to adopt maybe things that were a sort of slightly further outside the comfort zone than they would have before the pandemic. I think there's a big urge to, one of the better expression, right, go for it, right? We've got these capabilities, let's invest in technology, let's get it in, let's see how it works. The agile deployment is much more prevalent now rather than the big behemoth ERP implementations, that you mentioned earlier, James. That just, so yeah, they'd be my takes.
Nice one.
So then, completely undermining my own statement earlier. So Backbase is a big global company. One of the things I would be traveling a lot to Amsterdam, right? So I'd have this good sort of link and bond with my peers, but you have to work quite hard as a big global company to create that link. When you're in an office out of country. And one thing that has been incredible is now everybody's on an equal playing field. So whereas, for example, I make concrete, we used to have this like quarterly, like big all town hall thing, and in Amsterdam they'd all get into one massive auditorium, and then we would join on the Hivo, and then you get the side jokes and the winks and the nods and all that kind of stuff going on in Amsterdam, and it was funny, but I was aware the guys at home, they're probably getting, can I get off this now, because it's not engaging with me. And now everybody's thinking around, how do I engage with everyone? How do I make it much more inclusive? So that's been a massive win. And then all the other things, all the perks, all the working from home, again, accelerated that flexibility. I think things were getting more flexible and more flexible, but it's just, the what I would say, the flip to that maybe, more to the people coming into industry first. Personally, I'd still be looking to be able to be physically with a senior engineer a couple of days a week, because the stuff you learn is invaluable just by observing, and it's very difficult to do all that remotely, and that has been challenging, I'd say, for our grads. They're still doing fantastic stuff, but I just feel like coming straight out of uni, and from my personal experience, my social life was, I had social life outside of work, but it grew immensely through my work colleagues as well. So I do think I would really ask the question, like, are you guys actually about? How would you guys get together? How often do you get together? And don't underestimate how important it is. How many of us have met partners and wives and girlfriends and boyfriends through work? It's just, not all the time, but I think it's worth getting a few days a week.
Interaction, yeah, super important.
There's one technology change as well, actually, which is really specific, I guess, to FinTech, and that's open banking, which has already had a big impact and will increasingly have a massive impact over the next couple of years. It allows you to do more than just check your bank statement. You do things like, proof of funds and source of funds checks. You can do ID checks through your open banking, etc. So open banking and the opening up of the data that financial institutions like banks hold to other parties like ourselves, and no doubt like James's business, is really big at the minute, and will continue to be over the next couple of years.
You're taking big advantage of that. Another example of a sort of decent Welsh FinTech as well, taking advantage of exactly that, opening up of the banking. So.
Yeah. Right, so I think we're going to just do one question to finish off, unless anyone else puts a question in the question box. So we kind of looked back a little bit, but moving forward, and I've realised I'm reversed, so that didn't quite make sense. But moving forward, can you, over the next kind of 5 years, can you tell me something that excites you about the industry and something that worries you about the industry?
At the last, I need some thinking time.
Or just one of them.
What sort of worries me is the effect on talent acquisition and retention that just such an open market creates. We've heard, and these, well, we don't know if they actually sort of panned out in the end, but we heard of a company that was recruited in Wales for a large number of positions. And the salary ranges were absolutely bonkers, and I think it didn't pan out as they expected in the end, but it caused such a stir. I think the turmoil, until that sort of settles down, and how you understand that parity from cross borders, I think is a really tricky one to deal with. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's going to cause real friction. Opportunities, come back to me on that one. It's always easy to think of the negatives, isn't it? But
well, I've got. Do you need more time, James? I think I've got mine.
Brilliant.
Go for it.
Probably something that's going to be really important to all of us, actually, which many people won't be aware. This is a bit of a nerd answer, but it's the launch of the Digital Identity Trust Framework from the government. It's been handled by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. I don't often praise government, but so far, whilst it's a bit late and a bit slow, the premise behind it is very, very good. It'll matter to everyone in this country over the next 18 months, 2 years. It'll have a big impact. It'll bring efficiency, trust, uniformity, and better standards that'll allow us all to digitally confirm our identity. And for those of us in the industry, it will set the landscape in which we can all share data better and more effectively. So I think probably for us, and actually for all of us in the country, but also for us who work in this sector, that'll have a really big impact, the Digital Identity Trust Framework.
Brilliant.
Yes, worries. I guess again, we'd say, like, to that point, with the market getting so flat, why would you want to work for company X, company Y? That decision. Why would you want to stay and work for a Welsh company and so on? So I do worry. I've always wanted to work where there's a bit of a mission, and you're working together on that mission. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a bit old school. I like being in a room with people every now and again to make that mission happen. So if we become this fully remote, for people like me who like being together, what does that mean? I guess that's one of my worries. I don't think it's. I think different companies will set up the way they want to be set up, right? So I think there'll be companies who will set themselves up to be more together, and other companies that don't. So, but my concern is more for the grads, the new to industry. What's their experience going to be like? So I think that's really important to be asking when entering industry. I guess expanding on the identity stuff, because in Cardiff actually we build out a lot of the identity work as well, so that is a particularly exciting case, and actually more ways of authenticating yourself, not just the standard ways. We've seen some incredible stuff from some vendors just logging in without actually entering any information. So they were using all sorts of analysis to work out, was this you, based on how you're moving your mouse and what time of day it was in your country and all this kind of stuff, and they were trusted by a Czech bank. That's enough to authenticate the user, which I found was wild. But that technology, that removing that friction to get out things really interesting. And I really don't think, and I think it's fair to say, the open data, the open banking world, there was a big, the banks have now been forced, their arms being bent to make sure this data is open. I really don't think we've seen genuine, incredible applications of this yet. So I think as the boundary to that comes down and down, more people move out of industry and move around the companies in South Wales who've been doing this, and they take those ideas, just like how our entire, all these kind of key people we talk about in South Wales, the admirals, the Go Compares, all these, they were all seeded from the same bunch of people who've gone off and spun off their own little companies. I think that's really exciting to see what comes out of the upcoming, the incumbents in South Wales. Be really interesting as well.
Thank you.
As much as the digital identity trust framework is the thing that I think is potentially quite exciting. My worry is a stat that I mentioned earlier. 8% of my son's course being female in computer science, right? That's something that should bother us all for good commercial and product development reasons I touched on, but as a society, that's not cool. And the problem is talking to people when they're in sixth form's too late. We need to be talking to kids younger, so that whatever your background, whatever your gender, whether you're disabled, able, or wherever you come from, you feel that technology and FinTech is a home for you, and that's clearly not the case right across the technology sector in this country at the minute. And that should worry us all, and we need to do more about it.
I think that's a
really. Oh my God, I didn't want to end on a downer. Sorry about that.
No, I was going to say that's a really lovely thing to end on. There's so much worry about this. But yeah, do a little dance again for us, and then maybe we'll. I just want to thank all of our speakers this evening. It's been really, really enlightening. Andy, I don't know if you want to come back in and say a few closing words. There he is.
Yeah, I can do that. I'm just going to share. Oop, there we go. Blacked out. I'm just going to share a little slide with some links for everyone in case anyone wants to get in contact with us. Bear with me a second. Is that not going to work, is it? There we go. Bear with me. Sorry, everyone.
See something. Yeah.
You'd see everyone, see everything else except.
There we go. Lovely stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, all that's left for me as chair of the branch, and on behalf of our committee, is to say a huge thank you to our event speakers, Shay, James and Tim. Thank you to FinTech Wales, and to our BCS organizer tonight, Lauren. Thank you very much. And hiding away in the background, we've also got Jeremy from the committee as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us to watch the live stream, and to those watching it back on YouTube. The BCS, British Computer Society, has over 60,000 members in 150 countries, and a wider community of business leaders, educators, practitioners, policymakers, all committed to our global mission. And as a charity with a Royal Charter, our agenda is to lead the IT industry through its ethical challenges, to support the people who work in the industry, and make IT good for society. Now, as a branch, our mission is to inspire, influence, and support those in the industry, as well as those at the very beginning of their IT journey, either as a student, graduate, apprentice, or those embarking on a career change into IT. Our South Wales branch has a monthly live webinar, such as the one you've just watched, It's for members and non-members on a diverse range of topics from across the industry, from fintech and health tech to cybersecurity, software development, everything in between. And the branch is always looking for new members as well as new volunteers to help out on our committee. So if you'd like to know more about what our committee gets up to, maybe you'd like to get involved, or you'd just like to follow one of our socials to keep up to date with our upcoming events, then please reach out to us through the links on the screen. So thanks again everyone for watching. Hopefully see you at our next event on the 3rd of May, which is all about the online IT museum, the archives of IT. And see you then. Thank you everyone.